Boom. My name is Jason Williams. I'm 29 years old, a graphic designer by trade, born and raised in South Los Angeles. On the night of August 14th, 2024, I was driving home from a late client meeting, just me, my Honda Civic, and a dashboard clock reading 11:03 p.m. The streets were mostly empty, the glow of neon signs and street lamps reflecting on wet asphalt from an afternoon sprinkle. I had the radio on low, some smooth jazz track drifting in the background. Nothing more than the usual soundtrack to my commute. As I approached the intersection of Jefferson and Western, a patrol car pulled alongside me, lights flashing. My heart sank. I slowed, signaled, and guided my car to the curb. Two officers stepped out. One leaned toward my window and asked to see my license and registration. These were routine questions until they weren't. The second officer circled my car, his flashlight beam sweeping the interior. The first officer thumbed through my documents, his expression unreadable. And then came the words I never expected. "Sir, do you have anything illegal in the car?" I shook my head, keeping my hands visible on the steering wheel. "No, officer, just my laptop bag and work samples." He nodded absently, then called for backup. I watched in disbelief as another patrol car rolled up behind mine. My pulse thundered in my ears. I'd done nothing wrong, yet in that moment I realized that my skin color had already made the call in their minds. Within minutes, I was ordered out of the car, hands pressed against the hood, breath visible in the cool night air. They frisked me roughly. My protests were met with tight grips on my biceps, and the flashlight beam danced across my face, harsh and blinding. They found nothing, no weapon, no contraband, just my wallet, keys, and a crumpled script for a proposed ad campaign. Yet they kept me pinned for another half hour while they searched the car. My Armani suit jacket lay on the pavement, damp with condensation as I watched them toss my belongings aside. Eventually, one officer returned my ID. "We're sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Williams," he said, voice flat. "But we had a call about a black male in a gray sedan acting suspiciously." I nodded numbly, heart still pounding, as they stepped back and let me retrieve my things. My car smelled of sweat and fear. The jazz tune on the radio was still playing unchanged, as if nothing had happened. I drove off, hands trembling on the wheel. But that stop was only the beginning. 2 nights later, I was walking along Venice Beach when a store alarm triggered. I passed by to see an officer tackling a man in a hoodie. Before I could step aside, another officer shouted, "Hey, you, stop right there." He grabbed me, slammed me against the rough wooden siding of a boardwalk shop, and demanded to know what I was doing there. I stammered my name, explained I was just a pedestrian heading to catch a late bus. He let go after another frantic call to dispatch. No apology, no explanation, just the echo of footsteps disappearing into the night. By the third encounter, I understood the pattern. No crime needed to be committed. Suspicion was enough. I began to dread every glance, every siren in the distance. My phone logs, my delivery receipts, even my gym membership card felt like potential evidence. The city I loved had become a place of unpredictability, where any evening stroll could end with my wrists chafed from rough cuffs and my dignity scattered on the pavement. Then came the day the real charges arrived: a convenience store on Pico Boulevard, a robbery at gunpoint. The suspect, a black male, thin build, driving a gray Honda Civic. The description matched me perfectly. I was at my desk in Koreatown when detectives knocked on my door. They showed me the security footage, grainy, obscured by glare, but they pointed at a figure entering the store, brandishing what looked like a handgun. They said the license plate matched mine. The hoodie was identical. My protests were drowned out by official certainty. You fit the description, they said. You're coming downtown for questioning. I spent that night in a holding cell, lit by fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The metal bench bit into my jeans. Across from me sat other detainees, faces weary, eyes hollow. Some whispered that this was common, mistaken identity, racial profiling, systemic bias. By morning, I had missed my work, my alarm had gone unanswered, and my reputation lay in the hands of prosecutors who had never met me. When I appeared before Judge Martinez, I was dressed in a borrowed suit, nice enough, but not mine. The prosecutor read the charges: armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft. Each phrase landed heavy, like a gavel striking in my chest. My attorney, a public defender named Ms. Alvarez, gave me a sympathetic look. One of those looks that said, I'll fight, but the odds aren't in our favor. The courtroom was a tension-filled hall of polished wood and austere columns. Jurors sat in hushed formation, reviewing notes. The judge's bench rose high above the lawyers' tables. I took a seat in the dock, glancing at the gallery, family members of the victim, local community members, some curious onlookers. I could see the cameras from local news crews tucked behind glass, their lenses aimed like accusatory fingers. And then it began. The first witness, a night clerk who claimed to have seen me through the window. He hesitated when asked about the lighting, the angle, the clarity of his view, yet his voice resonated with unwavering certainty. I'm positive that was him. His words echoed in the silence that followed, a silence that weighed more than any evidence. I stared at the floor, mind racing. The reality settled over me like a shroud. I was not in a story anymore. I was the story. And in this city, where justice was supposed to be blind, it seemed she had taken off her blindfold. Um, I woke before dawn, the harsh fluorescent lights of the detention center cell cutting through the darkness. My suit hung wrinkled in a plastic bag on the wall. By 8 a.m., I was shackled and led through a labyrinth of corridors, past steel-barred windows and locked doors. The bail hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m., and I had no idea what to expect. The courtroom filled quickly, reporters murmuring into their recorders, family members hugging in the pews, and a few activists holding signs demanding justice for Jason Williams. Ms. Alvarez, my public defender, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder before we walked up the aisle. The bailiff called my name in a voice that echoed off the high ceiling. Judge Martinez presided from a raised bench, her expression stern. The prosecutor, Detective Lee, stepped forward and cataloged the charges: armed robbery, assault with deadly weapon. He argued that I was a flight risk, that the evidence was overwhelming, and that community safety trumped any individual hardship. His words landed like bricks on the jury's bench. Miss Alvarez rose next. She described me, a lifelong resident of South LA, gainfully employed, no criminal history, with family roots in the neighborhood. She spoke of my volunteer work mentoring at-risk youth and of the inconsistencies in the store clerk's identification. She reminded the court of my strong community ties, my elderly mother, my nephew in high school, and pleaded for a reasonable bail. My heart pounded as she spoke. Outside through the tall windows, the sun climbed over the palm trees. I saw my sister, tears in her eyes, holding my mother's hand. Their faith in me kept me upright. Judge Martinez consulted her notes. She asked me a single question: Mr. Williams, why should you be released? My voice cracked as I explained my fear of losing everything, my home, my job, my future, on what I knew was a grave error of justice. By the time I finished, my throat burned, but I felt a moment of truth shared. Her ruling came swiftly. Bail denied. The gavel hit like a verdict. I would wait for trial behind bars. The room erupted, my family sobbing, Miss Alvarez mouthing, "I'm sorry," reporters scribbling. As I was led away, I realized that in this system, suspicion outweighed presumption of innocence. My real fight had just begun. Jury selection began the next week. We entered that jury room like nervous students awaiting an exam. 30 potential jurors sat in numbered seats, middle aged professionals, retirees, teachers, a handful of young adults. Ms. Alvarez and the prosecutor took turns asking questions, probing for bias. Um, the first panelist, Mrs. Turner, nodded earnestly as she pledged to judge the facts, not the color of his skin. But when asked if they had any personal experiences with street crime, her polite smile flickered. She shook her head. Another prospective juror, Mr. Chang, confessed he watched police stop scandals on the news and felt uneasy. He was excused for cause. With each question, I watched the faces for empathy or disdain. I thought of my own childhood, playing basketball under street lights, football games on Friday nights, my coach who insisted trust the process. I wondered if these strangers could trust mine. 40 peremptory challenges later, we had 12 jurors. Only 2 were people of color. The rest were white or Latino. In that moment, I realized the playing field was anything but level. The bailiff swore them in. "Do you solemnly swear to render a true verdict?" Their unanimous chorus echoed through the hushed courtroom. That afternoon, opening statements began. The prosecutor painted me as a predator, calculating, brazen, a threat to community safety. He spoke of protecting law abiding citizens and zero tolerance for violent crime. His tone was clinical, his words measured for maximum impact. Miss Alvarez rose with a quieter strength. She spoke of a man wrongfully accused, a life in service to others, a system that had failed to look beyond assumptions. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said softly, "the truth demands more than fear." Her voice carried through the silent room, and I dared to hope some hearts had opened. As we adjourned, I caught the eye of juror number 7, a teacher with kind eyes, and she offered a brief, encouraging nod. In that small gesture, I found the courage to continue. The prosecution brought forward 5 witnesses that day. First, the store clerk, shaky but resolute, reconfirmed he saw the robber through a rain-spattered window. Under cross-examination, he admitted the glare made identifying a face difficult. The defense seized on that admission like a lifeline. Next, Detective Lee detailed the ballistics report and pointed to shell casings found near the store's back exit. He claimed matching calibers and trajectory analysis proved the weapon was fired from my car. Ms. Alvarez stood her ground. "Detective, did you establish the car belonged to Mr. Williams at the time of the incident?" He hedged. "No direct link. The casings could have been planted." Then came the surveillance video, grainy footage looped on the courtroom screen, a dark figure at the counter, a flash of metal, a hurried exit. The face was obscured by a hoodie. The license plate was unreadable. Yet the prosecutor insisted that reasonable doubt did not apply. He claimed the modus operandi matched several other robberies in the district. I watched from the dock, pulse thudding as the video played. The figure's gait was different from mine, nervous, shuffling. But who would notice in a hoodie? The courtroom lights dimmed with each replay. I could almost feel my identity slipping away. By midday, the prosecution rested. Miss Alvarez asked for a brief recess. She returned with a fresh piece of evidence, my electronic toll collection record, showing I was 2 miles south of the store at the moment of the robbery. The judge allowed it. The jury scribbled notes furiously. That evening, I was escorted back to the holding cell. My hands still shook. The prosecution's case was powerful, but cracks had appeared, glints of truth where darkness reigned. I closed my eyes, recalling my mother's words. Justice is a light in the dark, Jason. Keep looking for it. On the fifth day, the defense called 3 witnesses. First was my neighbor, Mr. Lopez, who testified I was in my apartment teaching a design workshop when the robbery occurred. He presented a time-stamped video feed from his doorbell camera, clear image of me standing in my living room. The jury leaned in, disbelief flickered across their faces. Second, a forensic analyst explained the shell casings had no fingerprints, no DNA, no definitive link to my belongings. The prosecutor tried to dismiss the evidence as inconclusive, but the analyst held firm. If not mine, whose? That question hung in the air, unnerving everyone. Finally, the star witness, the forensic video expert. Under oath, she narrated the limitations of the store's camera: lens distortion, low frame rate, motion blur. She demonstrated side-by-side comparisons of my gait versus the robbers. They didn't match. Gait analysis, she explained, was a recognized scientific method. The defense's table exhaled collective relief. I felt tears sting my eyes when Ms. Alvarez addressed the jury one last time. Gentlemen and ladies of the jury, you have heard the fear-driven narrative and the hard data. This case is not about race or bias. It's about truth. Mr. Williams deserves that truth. Please remember the presumption of innocence. I glanced at juror number 7 again. Her eyes glistened with empathy. Outside, the golden California sun dipped low. I realized then that this trial was bigger than me, a mirror to a community wrestling with prejudice. When the door closed behind me that evening, I felt a cautious hope stirring. The seeds of justice had been sown. Now we awaited the jury's deliberation. The jury returned after 4 hours. My heartbeat echoed in the silent courtroom. Judge Martinez invited the foreperson to speak. The foreperson stood, cleared her throat, and declared, "We, the jury, find the defendant." Time froze. My shoulders slumped as the words "not guilty" rang out. Relief crashed over me in waves. Relief, disbelief, exhaustion. My family wept openly. Ms. Alvarez allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. I hugged my sister, promising to never leave her side again. But outside the courthouse, the crowd was mixed. Some cheered. Others whispered that the system had failed. A local news anchor asked me, "Do you feel justice was served?" I paused, choosing my words. Tonight, the jury saw the truth, but tomorrow, many won't. We still have work to do. In the days that followed, my story sparked conversations across Los Angeles. Community forums debated reforms. My client meetings resumed, but I carried a new purpose: volunteering for legal advocacy, speaking at schools, mentoring youth on knowing their rights. At home, I framed the newspaper headline, "Graphic Designer Exonerated After Flawed ID." Above it hung a photo of my mother holding a sign, "Justice for All." In that moment, I understood that one verdict could not undo the fear, but it could light a path forward. Justice, I learned, is never final. It is a continuous journey, a collective promise to see beyond our assumptions and guard the rights of every individual. And as long as we keep walking that path, hope will outshine the darkness.